Tap transfer artist paper is not just for photos on fabric. It can do so much more, and I'm going to show you how. Hi, I'm Lesley Riley with Transfer Artist Paper, also known as TAP. And I've been transferring for over 20 years. The last 10 years, all I've used is Transfer Artist Paper because it's simply the best out there. For me, the surprise was how many surfaces it worked on, and how many different surfaces. So I am going to show you today some of those surfaces, and well, let's just get started. The first one I'm going to start with is glass, and I want to start with that surface because you have to start with a cold iron. So since it's not heated up yet, we'll do that. Why are you starting with a cold iron? Because if you put a hot iron onto glass, it's going to crack. So you want to warm the glass up at the same time as you're warming up the transfer. Slowly, heat it slowly. I'm going to put the heat on to not totally the highest, but almost the highest setting. I would go to the highest setting and put it back just a bit. All right, so I've printed my photo onto TAP. I'm going to lay that face down on the glass, get it centered at the edges, and then I'm going to start ironing, just like you would on any other surface. But it's going to take a while for it to stick to the glass because it has to heat up slowly, like I said. I don't want it to be get out of alignment, so I'm holding on to it until it starts to stick. It'll reach, like I like to say, a critical point where it sticks to the glass and then you can let go, so to speak. Now what happens if you do get it too hot or iron it too long on the glass? The glass is going to split or crack. Ask me how I know, right? As long as your glass isn't getting too hot, by leaving your iron in one spot, you won't have any trouble. Now when you're transferring on any surface, the tendency is to try for perfect, to try to get every little piece and every edge lined up and perfect. But then, it doesn't really look like a transfer, does it, if it's so perfect? People will say, oh, well, that just came that way, or it was already printed on there. So having some imperfection to me is not a bad thing. I don't call them failures unless the only failure I ever consider it being not good would be if you're transferring a face and one of the eyes doesn't transfer. That's not so hot. All right, so I'm going to use something to help me get it off so I don't burn my fingers. Look at that. It's too hot for me to pick up right now, but beautiful transfer. If you have different projects, you can do shadow boxes, things like that. Put the glass in there and have that be part of the dimension of the finished object. You can use this in a frame as an overlay for another image. There's so many possibilities with transferring onto glass. But I want to warn you, don't start thinking about glasses and plates and things like that. It's got to be a flat surface. You can't do it on any curved surface. It just doesn't work with the iron. Mica is a wonderful substrate to transfer onto. It's a lot like glass, but it does not crack, and you can iron onto it without starting with a cool iron. It's wonderful for creating layers in book projects, a lot of different applications. So I just wanted to share that with you as another option. Craft metal is another surface that you can iron tap transfer artist paper onto. It has to be a thin metal though. You don't want a thick metal like for construction or other applications. You want the craft kind. You want it to be thin because it needs to get that heat, and a thicker piece of metal just doesn't work that well. This is a scrapbook stick-on metal aluminum sheet. I've also used the very thin craft sheets that you can buy at the craft store. So I'm using the same image just to give you a variety of what it looks like on glass and what it looks like on a shiny surface like this. Again, it's not going to take as long as it does to transfer onto fabric because it's a non-absorbent surface. So keep that in mind. There's absorbent surfaces like fabric, wood, papers, and then there are non-absorbent surfaces. They don't take as long. Okay, because of the reflection, it's hard to really see how this looks clearly, but clearly to me, I think it looks awesome. I like the fact that some of the areas did not transfer. It looks like the clouds in the sky or the stars. But there's enough, definitely enough of the image on here that you can see what it is, get the impact that you wanted, and I consider that a good one. Wood is an absorbent surface, so transferring onto wood is wonderful, but it's unfinished wood that's easiest to use. You can paint the wood or stain it. If you stain it, that's easier because that goes into the wood. It doesn't seal the wood like an acrylic paint would. Acrylic paint, after it's been applied, takes time to cure. So if you're in a hurry and you wanted to paint your wood and then do a transfer onto it, you're going to get a gunky mess because the heat of the iron is going to heat up that acrylic paint, and it's not going to work. So you really have to plan ahead if you want to work on painted wood. I have a piece here that was painted a while ago. I let it sit it was for another project, so it did sit for quite some time. And then I sanded it smooth. Sometimes when you paint the wood, or pretty much always when you paint the wood, your brush strokes are going to create very small ridges. You might not see them with the naked eye, but they're there, and the paper knows. The paper wants that flat surface to transfer onto. So here's my image. I'm going to place it on here and center it. Now I'm ready to transfer. On this side. That's what I love about the new formulation for tap, is that you can go back in several times and get all the ink to transfer off. It takes just practice and getting to know the materials you're working with, the surfaces you're putting them on. Because I encourage you to experiment too. Think, can I put it on that surface? You might be thinking right now, can I put it on a tile? An unglazed tile? Yes, you can. All right. I call that a beauty. A little bit of ink left on here. Doesn't bother me. Once you do the transfer, it's going to be a little sticky. So you want that to dry or cure, I guess is a better word for that. And then after that's all done, you can take some like walnut inks or some stains and stain over this, give it a sepia tone, make it look even older than it looks right now. Here are a couple more samples of transfers onto unfinished wood, a black and white image and a colored image. The images were trimmed to the size of this wood plaque, and then both were transferred using the same method I just did. I often get questions about transferring onto canvases. Canvas boards are fine and easy to transfer onto, the canvas panels that you can buy. I like to sand them because they do have the gessoed surface, and I want to get rid of as much of that sealed surface as I can. But just a light sanding seems to take enough of it off that the transfer will adhere to it. As you can see here, this one is very smooth and looks, beautiful on this surface. Now, what about a stretched canvas? That does not work because it's got those stretcher bars on the edge, and then in the middle of the canvas there's some resiliency where there is no, there's nothing behind it. So you've got an uneven surface when the iron hits the stretcher bars, you've got this big change in the pressure between the iron and the paper. So you get a wonky edge, and you can't really transfer onto a stretched canvas. But what you can do is iron your image directly onto canvas, leaving yourself enough margin, and stretch it yourself over stretcher bars that you get at the art supply store. Another surface that we have at our disposal is Craftex. It's like the label on your jeans. It's something between paper and fabric, and it takes transfers beautifully. This is the natural color. You can also use the white because that's got enough light in it. You can tea stain the white. You can, tea or coffee. I don't like to go any darker than the natural color. All the other colors are so richly saturated that unless you have a high contrast image like black or white, I would choose not to use those. But it's possible, and maybe you can come up with something that I haven't thought of yet. So I'm going to just transfer this image right onto here, leaving enough at the top for other ideas to add on to this. I can come back in later if I decide that I want to give this a word or something at the top. I can add that word, and that's extra space. I just have to be careful to cover the already transferred image with the silicone release paper or a press sheet or something, because you can't iron directly over a transferred image. The iron just sticks to it. It's like it reactivates it and it gets stuck. If you do see some feel some resistance or see some of the polymer when you take a peek and start to peel, then just go back and keep ironing. Over ironing is not a problem. Under ironing could be. There we go. Okay. When you are working with dark backgrounds or busy backgrounds, you may want to consider working with a high contrast image or a black and white image. They stand out really well against something like this cork. This is a cork fabric that you can actually sew with. So here we go. I'm going to place it here. Just give it another once over. Beautiful. I really like that. You can see where some of the white polymer on the paper that wasn't trimmed makes a little bit of a difference, but it actually helps that image to pop up even more. You can transfer onto a variety of leathers, but you have to make sure they haven't been, I think the term is glazed. A lot of the different leathers, when they get to a finishing stage, they're glazed for their finishes, like white leather. There's a lot of processes white leather's been through a lot of processes and has a glaze on it. So this is a tan leather, but it has no finish on it. But you can see that when you apply the tap paper, that the polymer on the paper has darkened it. Now to me that's wonderful. I like the way this looks. But just caution it, if you want this color, you're not going to get it when you transfer the polymer onto the leather. There are also a lot of things you can do on tap that aren't printing images onto it. You can stamp onto it. You have to use a pigment ink. Anything with alcohol or any kind of solvents in them will destroy the coating on the paper. So it has to be a pigment ink when you use the stamp. Not a problem though. So I've stamped this image onto tap, and then I'll transfer it onto who knows what. If you're like me, you've got a lot of markers, pens, pencils, also, I can't even name everything that's available to us nowadays to use for making marks. But I do know that these will work, and the best way to find out, the way I find out how something works, is just take a piece of, it can be scraps from something you've trimmed off, or just another piece of the tap paper, and just make some marks. You can write down what it is, or if you remember, you can write it down after you transfer it, because if I write the word crayon now, it will transfer in reverse, okay? But it's just a test, it's a sample, so it doesn't matter if it's frontwards or backwards. So this is like a gel marker. I do want to say though, when you have something like this that will lay down a lot of color or pigment, you don't want to put it on too thickly. Whatever you're working with, you want thin layers. The larger nibs on a marker work beautifully. A small nib, a small hard nib, is not gonna, it's kind of gonna glide over the paper and leave a scratchy mark. So look for markers that have wide, softer nibs. You can use charcoal, soft charcoal, harder charcoal, any marker that, as long as it doesn't say alcohol ink. If it's water-based, it's all yours for the taking. Just test before you go. Let's see, regular crayons that you used as a child will work. So another water-based markers here. These are nice because they're brushes. You can get very painterly effects with them. And soft pastels. So have a test sheet. Walk through your art room and just find out find everything that you own, and then start testing it. And then, so you'll have your own reference sheet. Okay, this was a drawing that I found in one of those boxes from years ago, and I thought that would look nice to transfer onto some fabric. I've already colored it in with all or some of the things I mentioned before, but I'm just going to show you with this. I think this is the brown. Yeah, I'll give her some color in her hair. So I printed the image onto tap and went over some of the lines with the marker just to strengthen them. What I'm going to do with this now is transfer it to Aida cloth or cross stitch cloth and then cross stitch it. So you can use this for your own design work. This is a large weave. It's got holes or hills and valleys, so the transfer might not look 100% perfect, but it's perfect enough for you to cross stitch over. It gives you your colors and your placement for everything. All right. Because of the weave of the cloth now, you don't have all that great detail, but you've got exactly what you need to do a cross stitch on this. All of your colors are here, the proportions, the details, and I think it's going to turn out beautifully once you take your threads and your hand and finish it off. Thanks for watching this today. I hope I've inspired you with all my examples and your little creative wheels are turning to try some things of your own. You can get more information on the packaging insert that comes with every package of Tap Transfer Artist Paper. There's an overview of the basics. You can also look for my other videos, Tap Basics on Fabric and Tap Basics Photo Editing. And Tap Basics Photo Editing because every good project begins with a good photograph. Thanks so much.